Today it's time for Rate My Build again, the series where I rate builds that you send me on Twitter, look for potential improvements and give you general feedback on those builds. I've changed quite a few things up from the first part. As usual, let me know if you like it or not. Give me a thumbs up or thumbs down depending on how you feel about the series in its current state, so I can further adjust it so you enjoy it more. I'll talk some more about this at the end of the video. For now, let's jump into the builds. The first build is by Seraph123 and it's an Erlang Shen jungle build. The build is Ninja Tabi, Archival, Silver Branch Bow, Stonecutting Sword, Executioner and Mantle of Discord. Unfortunately, I do think this build is lacking in quite a few regards. First of all, it is very focused on basic attacks, which in itself is fine if you want to go that route. But if you want to go for a full basic attack speed focused build, then you want to have Concise in there. Concise is a massive damage spike for any attack speed focused build, and you should never skip it if you're going for that sort of build. Additionally, Archival and Silver Branch Bow can be a very nice combination, but it's nothing that I would recommend on a generally frontliney character like Erlang Shen. You are gonna be facing enemies that will burst you down very easily, and until very late game you have nothing against that. You have Archival and Silver Branch Bow that don't give any defense, Stonecutting Sword that only gives situational defense, same for Executioner, not giving any defense again, and then Mantle of Discord, which is so late into the game that you've probably been bursted over and over. So any player that looks at your build can just realize that they can easily focus you out and burst you down before your ultimate would even heal you back up, and with your shield having a little effectiveness. You should have some defensive options in your build. You should restrict yourself to either Archival or Silver Branch Bow. You should get Concise in there somewhere, maybe trading out even Stonecutting Sword and instead just getting a full-on defense item. Though I think that Stonecutting Sword overall is a great item, but in that case you maybe don't need Executioner. You should also look to trade out your, well, starter items of some sort, Archival and Silver Branch Bow, late in the game because they don't do much for you there, and I would say overall the build is just not that effective. I will give this build a 2 out of 10. It only really works when the enemy is completely ignoring you and you're snowballing like hell. Other than that, you will just get focused out way too hard, and any attack speed focused build should have Concise. Next, we have a Fafnir support build. I actually got 2 submissions for Fafnir support builds. I'm gonna go with the one that I personally liked better to start off with, to work with. I think it's not worth talking about 2 builds for the same character unless they're played in different roles. As such, we're doing like this. This Fafnir support build by Nanook is Reinforced Shoes, Spirit Rope, Stone of Binding, Hardwood Amulet, Sovereignty and Gauntlet of Thebes. Now I think this build has a lot of good items. What I have an issue with here is the order. Because Fafnir already has base protections, higher base protections than others in his passive, you kinda don't want to build too much into raw defense early and rather look for some options that have at least defense and health. And with this build you're doing the opposite. You get a little bit of health, 75 health from your shoes, but other than that, with Spirit Rope you're not getting any health, you're just getting protections. With Stone of Binding you're just getting protections, so until very late into the game you basically just rely on your protections with no health behind them, which makes you especially vulnerable to any sort of true damage, but also more to other damage sources because you don't have as much effective health as you could have if you have a mix of health and defenses. You also get the aura items way too late into the game when you want to have them very early, where the aura does more against flat penetration. Later on enemies will have percentage pen, and with that the aura items become weaker. Again, the order within the aura items is also far from ideal. The item that you want first when you can make it work is Gauntlet of Thebes because it helps against everything. If there is a higher concentration of physical damage characters, or you're looking to go for early objectives, similar things like that, or looking for a lot of aggression, then it should be Sovereignty that you're looking for. Hardwood should usually be the last one and the most situational one. So instead of going for this build in this order, I would just recommend going for the same boots, then maybe going for Sovereignty first, then Gauntlet of Thebes, then consider Stone of Binding if you want it for your team. Though I think that Fafnir is not the greatest support for Stone of Binding because his CC is more single target focused, but it's still okay. And then maybe after that consider Spirit Rope, or later on, if you don't want to go into Hardwood, you could even consider Mantle of Discord or something like that. Something that makes you more tanky again and gives you some more CDR, which I think is very valuable on Fafnir because a lot of his potential comes from being in the dragon form in the ultimate. I will give this build a 6 out of 10, which mostly comes down to the order of the items. The items in themselves are fine, and I think it could be a very good build, only that the order at the moment doesn't really make sense for how the character works and how effective health works. Next up, we have a build by Jordan MG. This is a Fenrir ADC build. Devour's Gauntlets, Boots, I'm assuming Warrior Tabi, Hasten Fatalis, Wind Demon, Poison Star, and Deathbringer, the triple crit. I'm pretty sure this is a fun build, assuming that because of the smiley and knowing Jordan a little bit. So what I will say here is it's a beautiful build if you snowball like hell and no one's stopping you. If it's not gonna happen and the enemy realizes what you're doing, they're probably gonna walk all over you. If they have any potential to kill you, they will use it, and they will have that potential because you're completely squishy and you're not really functioning as an ADC. But in a pub stomp game, this could be the greatest build ever, because if you snowball with this, there is no stopping you. I will rate this build 420 out of 69. Corey Busher, however, sent us another Fenrir build, this time for jungle. Warrior Tabi, Jotun's Wrath, Height of the Urchin, Heartseeker, Titan's Bane, Spirit Robe. I think this build is generally pretty good. The one point where I would say you have to consider if this is worth it is Height of the Urchin. Now, this is something of a niche item in this season. We will often see other items picked over it because there are more, well, situational utility items. If you really think you want to have that heavy defense and a lot of health and just be a little egoistic in that regard, then you can obviously build it. But you could also, you know, consider if you communicate with your support and you get Gauntlet of Thebes, for example, instead of him, or something else that just helps the team a little more, depending on how the enemy team looks as well. If they have any specific damage that is clearly more present than the other sword. So I would say Height of the Urchin is a debatable choice and could probably just be replaced with a Spirit Robe that comes in later, and then get something else towards late game, like for example Mantle of Discord or something with health if you wanted a little more synergistic. But it still is a very good build. Outside of that, it has everything you need. It has the penetration, it has the cooldown reduction, it has the damage. Heartseeker is very strong at the moment, though I would like it a little earlier if you snowball, but that doesn't happen every game. So yeah, there are ups and downs to every build, but this one has very few downsides. I would rate this build a 9 out of 10. The next build is by Rev Mayes, check out his YouTube channel, and it's a Hades mid build. The build is Shoes of the Magi, Pythagorum's Peace, Height of the Urchin or Gem of Isolation, then the one that you didn't build, a Mantle of Discord, Spirit Robe or another situational, and then the same again. So this build is basically a mid build that turns Hades into a bruiser slash secondary support, which I think is an interesting approach. What's important to note here is that it requires a team where that works. If you need magical damage, if you need higher magical damage, then you will have a problem, but we see a lot of triple frontliner comps at the moment, and for that it's not too bad. The item that I'm a little bit uncertain about regarding the placement here is Pythagorum's Peace. Hades has a very rough time in middle lane because he can easily get focused out, he can easily get picked out, so you may want to have some early survivability, which would be easier to achieve through, for example, Gem of Isolation. At the same time, Gem of Isolation is really expensive, so I see where you're coming from with that. Pythagorum's Peace is something that otherwise I would rather build around 3rd to 4th slot on Hades specifically. As for Height of the Urchin, same thing as with Fenrir, make sure you really need it and consider if there are other options that would work instead as well. Hades is one of those gods who can get away with stacking. Warlock Sash, for example, is pretty good for him, even though it will weaken his power curve and is really hard to do because you can get punished for it. But at the same time, Hades is just one of those characters who basically can always get punished pretty easily. So once again, it's something worth considering. It's not easy to say something is good or bad for Hades because he is generally in a problematic spot. Overall, I like the tankiness and the cooldown reduction that this build provides for him, and especially with Pythagorum's for your team and the Gem of Isolation to set others up, he kind of works with that supporty-ish playstyle. So I would say this is a solid build, maybe a 7 out of 10, but it really depends on the game and the matchup. And that's it for today's build. As you can tell, I have slowed down things a little bit and we've gone through a little less builds. I know that some of you requested that, and I want to hear from you guys if you like this better, if it's better if I invest a little more time into them, if I should maybe invest even more time into them, or if you'd rather have more builds done in a faster way. As before, I will tweet out on Twitter when I take in more builds. I still have to work through all of the first ones as I promised. So this will still take, I think, at least 3 episodes. But then I will tweet out that I will now take in new builds. Don't send me builds beforehand. I cannot keep track of all of them. It's too many. And I will give some detailed explanation on how exactly that will go down. I will change the rules up a little bit when I take in builds for the next time. Again, please comment down below if there's anything you'd like to see changed about the series, or upvote or downvote depending on how you feel about the current state of the series, if there's anything I could change going forward. The only thing that I can tell you that I will most likely not change is I had the request to use the builds in a game every single time I talk about a build, and I don't think I will have the time to go through all of the builds that I talk about. I'm talking more from a perspective of somebody who's theory crafting, who has the numbers behind it and that kind of knowledge, and not so much want to go through every build and play it in a game that then has to be decent as well for it to look nice and not completely contradict what I may be saying because I end up with a bad game once. So that part will not happen. Anything else I'm open for. With that, thank you guys for watching. If you haven't subbed yet, feel free to do so. See you for the next one tomorrow. Sloth, out.